So we are going to talk about risk management instead, and we're focusing on organizational risks, but we are also, of course, looking at project and product risks because they all intertwined, and we are focusing on safety critical industries, particularly aviation today, because that's where when something fails, it is safety critical. There is potentially people getting hurt. So today we have two industry experts joining us from, let me pronounce this correctly now, Emma. Perhaps we start with intros first of Kira-Marie and Joao. Maybe Kira-Marie, you can start.
Sure, my pleasure. Thanks, Mariam. Hi, everybody. I'm Kira Marie. I'm from Germany, based in Munich, and I am a delivery manager and project management consultant at MIGSOP Cubed. Yeah, for the ones who maybe don't know MIGSOP Cubed, we are a leading consulting firm specialized in project management, PMO, project controls, but also project portfolio delivery. I'm with that company for almost 6 years now. I started in Toulouse in France and then moved back to Germany, the beautiful Munich. And I've been working so far mainly in the aviation industry, a lot with Airbus, but also in these last years for Lilium and more electric aircraft manufacturer. And maybe a little bit from a background. So I have a business administration international management bachelor that I did in Germany and France. I have my master's in project management. And so a lot of theoretical, but also practical knowledge on risk management acquired during these last years.
Very cool. And we actually met working together with our clients. So,
exactly.
So that was a very exciting time. Wow.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is João. I'm Portuguese, original from Porto. I work at MIGSOP Cubed Canada, Montreal at the moment. I've started in Porto in the automobile industry, deploying tools, PLM software, which involved a lot of process and change management. And currently I'm at Airbus Canada as a consultant and as a delivery manager as well. And I'm mostly focused on, risk management, hence the participating in this webinar, but also performance manager, which is an excellent way of linking or connecting the dots between the present and what's going on in the company and the potential threats and eventual improvements that can be brought to the business. As for academic background, I have a master's in mechanical engineering. The specialization is basically anything that is manufacturing processes and materials, which I felt that was interesting, but not really my calling. So I just diverted a little bit to project management. And this is how I currently am here. So Kira Marie invited me to talk a little bit with Marianne and Monica in order to see if it was a good fit for me to participate in this webinar. I think we've hit it out really well. And so basically, this is where I am. This is why I'm here. Thank you so much for inviting me, guys.
Thank you both for coming here and joining us. And while we are going to talk with Kira-Marie and Joao, Monica is going to take notes of how one can identify, manage, review, and monitor risks inside Jira. But before we start chatting, Monica, maybe a few words about you as well.
Excellent. Welcome, everyone. I'm Monica. My background is chemical engineering, and I actually worked with risk management mostly on pharma and manufacturing side. But also when I grew in my role in the organization as well, I also did some interesting organizational change management projects. Yeah, having a talk or discussion about how organizational risks actually impact every project, especially the major projects in the organization, is really my where I'm listening in today most of the time, and then I'm capturing in the background all the little bits and pieces what we will talk about today.
Great, thank you, Monica. And I just realized that maybe we should introduce SoftComply very briefly as well. SoftComply has been around for 9 years, and the idea was to help medical device and other safety critical industry companies with audit readiness, particularly in risk management and document management or quality management. And our idea was to really help small companies who are always short of money and short of time to get their products on the market fast and affordably. And this is what we have done in the last 9 years, particularly on Jira and Confluence. And this kind of altruistic idea came because my background is in academia, where we want to help the entire world into a better place. But let's start with the interesting discussion. And I would like to start with the aviation industry and talk about the different incidents that have happened in that industry. And then maybe paint a little bit of a background picture of why we're talking about it and why risk management in safety critical industry is important in the organizational level. So one of the worst ones that happened in the aviation industry was 1977 when two Boeing 747s collided in Tenerife because of fog. And the main reason was miscommunication between pilots and the traffic control. And that was one of the deadliest accidents in aviation history. And of course, for more recent events, we have probably all heard about the MAX 737 incident where the door plug was detached during ascent. That happened a year ago in January. And I think this year in January, we saw the DC Logan crash between a passenger jet and an army helicopter. And that was an air traffic control staff shortage as a reason for that. And my question, Joao, is for you. You have been working in aviation. Can you tell us a little bit more about these near misses, these accidents? What have been done to improve these? And how can other organizations learn from these incidents and improve themselves as organizations?
Yes. So regarding these incidents, I feel like the first one is clearly something that was an in-service problem, meaning that the product itself, so the aircraft itself, didn't really have an interference or an active role in this incident. It was pretty much miscommunication. It just highlights the importance of having good ground-to-ground communication in service. It highlights the importance of the human factor as well, even though we've been optimizing our systems more and more to the point where you can just put in your auto throttle and it parameters or configures everything you need to take off to land. It's still a very important factor in everything that is aviation safety. And so for the 1977, it was clearly a problem of so basically everything that precedes a takeoff. And it just highlights the importance of respecting checklists, of respecting everything that is procedure that precedes any sort of takeoff, taxi, anything that implies or involves moving your airplane within your airport. And of course, air traffic control is so important. It's one of the jobs with the most exhaustion reports, suicide rate as well. It's critical. People are always under stress. So the fact that maybe the conditions 40, 30 years ago were not ideal also led to a degradation, obviously, of the sort of the quality of the controlling of the exacerbation of this sort of incident. According to the Aviation Safety Network, since 1970, we've reduced fatal commercial accidents by sixfold, which is a big improvement, obviously. But the fact that this can still happen, the example that you gave very well at Logan, DC, between a helicopter and the civil aircraft, highlights as well the fact that we're not exempt from this sort of accident. It still happens. This was clearly an accident that was, I'd say, caused again by the stress-inducing job that is air traffic controlling, especially when there has been a cry for help. So there has been a risk raised before. We have multiple reports, multiple articles and news that came out after the incident where people were already asking for a reinforcement of that position. And the fact that air traffic control is a single point of failure really needs to be addressed in order to avoid major threats, which in this case result in the loss of human lives. So this is where the human factor really comes into play. The other example that you gave, so the door plug for the 737 that flew off, that has two components. It has the product component, it has a human component. So the human component is probably maintenance wasn't really well done, either by non-respect of the service bulletin and everything that tells the maintenance teams how to repair, overhaul, maintain an aircraft. And there's also probably a part of products that failed, as in redundancy systems need to be implemented in order to make sure that if a failsafe, if something fails, you have a failsafe to a failsafe to a failsafe to a failsafe. So redundant systems are really important to keep the product as integral as possible. And so I think there was a duality of factors. The crisis management was genius because they managed to solve the situation by landing safely, only incurring in 3 minor injuries. But it just shows that we're not out of the woods in terms of completely avoiding accidents. And the important thing is really to address single failures. So redundant systems, human factor.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joao, for that. I mean, there is a lot,
My
of
pleasure.
course, we can talk about Boeing, but like we said before, but actually they used to be very safe aviation product developer for sure. And I understand that after the merger with McDonnell Douglas in the 90s was when the culture changed and more of those type of accidents started to happen. So like we said at the beginning, all those risks on the product level, the safety, security, project, everything is intertwined so closely that, like you said, it's never one reason why things fail. It's the combination of things that we can see. We're not picking on Boeing. It was just the recent cases that have happened. And if I understand correctly, it's one of the cultural change that unfortunately led to that. But let's continue maybe a little bit with these examples. Kirami, you have been working also as a project manager and in risk management as a project manager. What have you seen where risk management could have potentially helped an organization or increased product development speeds?
I think, the examples that we have been mentioning are very good examples for highlighting the importance that organizational risk management really presents for the companies. For me, like organizational risk management it's really about the risks that are impacting the organizations, right? So it's something that every organization, no matter how big or small they are, they should be focusing on, because it's about risks that could impact the whole organization, that could potentially bring the company down. I've seen some of these examples also in the past, but also when we look in the news, there are so many examples where companies are not really reacting well because they did not do proper risk management, and especially organizational risk management. I like the example of the Nokia case. That's like already a few years ago, but Nokia was one of the leaders in the mobile phone market, and they would not see this emerging threat from the smartphones early enough. And they would not take any mitigation actions and try to prevent that risk from happening and be one of the leaders in that field. So then afterwards they would go down. And there are so many different examples also from automotive side where they would not really have all these production delays, and they would not properly identify the risks and do proper organizational risk management. I think also it's these risks that are on compliance side, on safety side, where you can just not ignore these risks, right? That does not make them go away, and you need to see them. You need to see them early enough, and you need to act on them and really, properly review them, and also regularly review them in order to make sure that you protect the business itself and also even have a good, product development speed, because you are able to do a good risk management.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. It sounds like risk management is only one side, and the opportunity management is a kind of a natural other side to this, because like Nokia's case, they missed their opportunity there. Right. But let's go back to aviation one more time, and then I promise to stop with the aviation. I have medical device and healthcare, and I believe a lot of other safety critical domains. Aviation has always been one that we look up to. We are impressed by the fact that there are checklists for every time a pilot starts a plane, and there is a dissemination of information when something goes wrong. And this is not only when something bad happens, but when something potentially bad could happen. The pilots tell the other pilots across the entire industry of either about the planes or about the runways. And this is something that you cannot see in healthcare. The X-ray machine that was introduced in 1980s interacted with failures that took several years to understand what exactly happened. And several people by that time had serious injuries, and there were people killed because of radiation poisoning. So for us, this is an industry which does want to do more and more proactively than other safety critical industries. Why are we still seeing those near misses, that many near misses or accidents, despite having this checklist in place? Joao, maybe you can tell us a little bit about this. I'm completely intrigued, because I've read so much about aviation, and it seems that this has been done or put in place that such fail-proof checklist. So what is happening? Is the
Absolutely.
pilot just ignoring them, or?
From one end to the other in aviation, you have checklists and checklists to the checklists. It's a never-ending process, but very fairly so because it's, as you said, a safety critical industry. So when you develop the products, every sort of engineering data needs to be accounted for. The project engineers will verify it, the product development teams will verify it, and so on, to make sure that everything is up to standards, up to regulations, up to norms. So that part, that's clear. The fact that we still see some deviations to those checklists, the fact that we see maybe pilots disregarding standard operational procedures, I think it all has to do with the human nature. So maybe there's also a deviation to the process from now and again, an oversight, data that is incorrect, but there's also a lot of maybe human interference, as in people might get confident, might get, I know they might feel like they know exactly what they're doing, which I don't doubt it. But at the same time, there's that component of maybe I should have checked this or I should have checked that. I'm going to give you an example to illustrate this point. We've been talking a lot about Boeing, so I'm going to turn the tables a little bit and talk about Airbus. There was this incident in my hometown in Porto, which was not a fatal accident, but it could have been, or it was considered by the Aviation Safety Network as a serious incident. So an A220 plane that is manufactured in Canada, in which I work in, was being flown by Swiss Air from Porto to Geneva. And basically, the flight crew went through their checklist, so the standard operational procedure. And at one point, the pilot engaged auto throttle, so everything was going well, except that the auto throttle didn't engage because you need a set of parameters that were maybe not well described in the checklist, or maybe the flight crew miscommunicated and they thought that each other kind of did the work, even though no one did, which is also a big classic in project management itself. Ultimately, the plane took off with insufficient engine power. Why would this be a very serious incident if ultimately nothing happens? The runway at Porto, and since it's a very small plane, still had about a kilometer to go. So basically, there was still a lot of runway to compensate for this insufficient engine power versus the angle of takeoff. It could have not been the case if we were considering larger airplane or a smaller runway or both. A combination of both would potentially be disastrous, because if you hit the grass, you might not be able to pull out of it. So basically, the fact that there was still runway was mitigation enough. But this just goes to show that human factor really has a lot to do with this sort of incident.
And you have to react quite quickly, I would imagine, right? Like
Exactly.
if you realize afterwards, okay, you are a very talented and experienced pilot to have
Mhm.
ignored the checklist, and you still go,
Exactly.
then you need to make a decision very quickly, right? If
The pilot in question was a very experienced pilot from Swiss Air, born in 59, I think. So quite a few years on him in his career as a pilot. So it just goes to show that even the most experienced ones overlook certain details, or maybe fly by some of the items on the checklist because they take it for granted. But it just goes to show that procedures happen or exist for a reason, and we need to respect them.
Absolutely. I think one of the first times when I realized these checklists are in place was when I read the book called Checklist, and where they
Okay.
talk about aviation industry checklists. And in that book, I think there was an interview with Citicorp CEO who said that the biggest failure or serious error in business, and in his case, he was constructing skyscrapers, is a failure of communication. And this is like another human thing, right? One of them, of course, that you are experienced and you ignore stuff, and the other is, of course, the communication bit. So that to have good risk management, we need to communicate about the risks. Kira-Mari, in your experience, what have you seen as interesting stories or some problems or risks that have arisen due to communication failures in an organization?
That's a very good question because, yeah, you might have heard that project management or, yeah, like the time of a project manager is basically 90% about communication. So we should have quite a good level of communication, right? We are project managers, so there shouldn't be too many communication failures that we see. But yeah, we do see them all the time in our daily lives, I would say. And yeah, whether it's from PMs or from engineers or whoever, we're all humans, we're all communicating and failures are happening. I think some of the major communication failures are about active listening and the fact of not active listening. I think that's really something where people say and they think they understood what the other person meant, but in the end they didn't. Misunderstandings are arising because of that. But also nonverbal communication, right, is something that is super important. And if you're not really careful for these little details, then you're overlooking things and you might miss some of the communication. I think especially in aviation, the jargon, like the abbreviations that everybody is using, and each abbreviation is used for 3 different meanings. That I think is also something that's happening all the time, and then leading to misunderstandings, leading to confusions. Cultural differences, I think it's also a big one where not always the awareness is there for cultural differences. And then also the fear of employees of making mistakes and of communicating about safety concerns, for example. So I think, some ways of how to improve this and how to prevent these communication failures from happening is generally, of course, training, right? Whether it's training on communication in general, on how to do active listening, but also training on cultural awareness, on cultural differences and how to deal with them, how to communicate through them. And then I would say generally creating a culture in which employees are feeling safe of reporting incidents and are feeling safe of admitting failures, admitting mistakes, but at least they are reporting about it and being clear about it. And I think that's something that some of the ideas that I have that could improve this situation and these communication errors.
That actually just reminded me of this Boeing Max case that I think there was widely shown in news and everywhere, where engineers were saying that this is not safe, but the managers did not listen. That was a perfect example of one of those communication failures, I think, that they said, but nothing happened. But maybe let's continue from here then. For us, we work in compliance. So for us, it's always been a pain to have compliance as an aspect of product development viewed as something necessary in an organization. And I think risk management does not go too far from that. People do not love risk management too much. And it's very often, even in safety critical industries, seen as a business of the risk team or the risk manager. So everybody else can live their life and do their own thing, and then the risk manager will take care of those risks that nobody wants to talk about. So of course, this is not the case. It's actually everybody's business. But how do you make it everybody's business, Kira Marie? Maybe you can tell us, how do you get people in an entire organization incentivized to actually care about risk management?
Yeah, that's a super good question and a super difficult job. I think, first of all, what is about risk management, what is super important is that it's part of the organizational culture, right? So you really need the buy-in, the commitment from the leadership. It needs to come from the top. If the top management, the leaders of the company, they are emphasizing the importance of risk management, then they can cascade it down to the teams. Right. So I think that is definitely the first thing that, leadership needs to see the importance and needs to communicate about this importance so that everybody, feels that it is important and that they do it. Then I believe that also, again, training and awareness sessions are super, super important, super helpful. I remember in my last engagement when I was trying to put the risk management framework in place and trying to explain everybody why we need to do this and why everybody needs to do this. And the first slide that I would always show is the slide of showing that everybody does risk management already in their daily lives, right? Marion, if we look outside now and we see the sky is so gray, it has been raining already the full day, more or less. If we want to go out, we take an umbrella, right? So we prevent us from getting wet. So this is like the easiest example of risk management that we do in our daily lives without even thinking, oh, I do risk management now. So we would always like give some of these nice little examples to people, explain them, yeah, that they are doing that already outside of work. So why not do it also inside of work, right? And really explain how this is helping us, how we can be more proactive, how we can anticipate risks and how we can be faster like this and how we can really have a more successful program management if we do this successful risk management. So this was something that we would always communicate about. And then I think also what is really helpful is having like a good technology and tool around it. So when we first started, we had a risk management tool that nobody was using because it was just not user friendly. Nobody knew how to raise a risk. Nobody knew how to update it or how to add any mitigation action. So then we were looking for tools that the employees were already using. So there we had like Jira for us in mind because this was really something that, yeah, they should use at least for their task management. So it was one of the tools they already have open. So why not have an add-on to do proper risk management in Jira so that yeah, employees, they do their tasks, and if they think of a risk, hey, they can directly identify it in one of the tools that they are already using. So I think that really helped to raise the importance and facilitate it really for the employees. And then we would have really regular risk reviews, again, with the management, so that, yeah, the employees really felt like, okay, my risks that I'm raising, they are being listened, they are being discussed, right? And mitigation actions are being implemented. So I think that is also something that can help in order to really make it everybody's business.
That's a very good point, actually, that one thing is to incentivize people to start putting risks in place or maybe identify risks. But the other thing is that if they don't see somebody else getting involved in their identified risks, they will probably not do it very much after that.
Exactly. It's a continuous process. It doesn't help just raising some risk and then letting them there, but we really need to, yeah, regularly review them and work with them.
Exactly, exactly. Good point. Good point.
The question is, do you think there is a relation that accidents happen that because risk management isn't properly done, because the development always has to be faster and faster? What's your general opinion about this? Is it harder to do proper risk management nowadays as we are living in this world with this fast growing technology? To me, it sounds really very much like culture discussion at your company. But what's your opinion about this, Kira-Marie?
I think indeed it is getting harder. Our world is getting harder, right? It is getting more and more fast paced. So it's true also like the risks that could potentially happen are getting like more and more crazy and faster, and you need to react faster. So yes, it might get a bit harder, but this doesn't make it less important. So I think we should still use the time, take the time to do proper risk management, and then maybe do it in a more agile way and be more iterative about it. But nevertheless, doing risk management is, even in today's, or especially in today's fast-paced environment, super, super important.
Thank you, Kira-Marie. João, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I think that if the development is faster and faster, it's for a reason. It's to ensure that accidents happen less frequently. The stats show that it indeed, from the 70s until now, if we reduce the accident or the fatal accident rate by sixfold, it's because we obviously can control this sort of accident incidents quite effectively with the systems that we're putting in place. However, I do agree that since the developments are faster, we have maybe more unknown grounds to explore. And in terms of risk management, it just means that we have to be even more diligent with what we document, what we identify, involve more and more people within the risk management teams, because obviously you need to embark the technical people, the people in charge of schedule, the integrators, the people who will be in charge of industrializing the modification. So it just means that we have to bring more people to the table. We need to make sure that more people are aware of risk management, are more involved in risk management as well in an active role. And if we ensure those conditions, I think that we can properly avoid any sort of potential threats and even capitalize on some opportunities to bring value to the business.
Yeah, thanks.
I hope this answers the question.
I also have one answer, because as you guys were talking, I was wondering if AI could help speed up the risk management as well. And then I realized actually the AI in the products will actually slow it down again, because, and this is particularly the case in AI-enabled medical devices that today still require some human oversight. So it's difficult because we need to now make sure that the data for training the algorithm is of good quality and that everything is working as expected. So there is much more testing going on into the devices than they used to, thanks to the faster and more advanced development cycle. So it's definitely a very interesting time. But maybe let's go away from aviation and air traffic controllers for a bit and talk about the smaller companies. The large organizations, you would hope that they take care of their risk management because they're large and they have, of course, everybody has budgetary constraints, but maybe not as tight as the small organizations. So should smaller organizations even do risk management, organizational level risk management, and where should they start? Joao, maybe you can tell us a little bit. If you think of an SME, where should they begin and why should they even do that? Let's say they have some products, they have product managers, they have project managers, they probably have sometimes looked into project risks, but that's about it. What should they do and where should they start to look into organizational risk?
So my experience focuses more on larger companies, but I did help some colleagues implement from scratch their risk management process within their own clients, which happen to be smaller companies with about maybe 100 employees, which would mean that it's a smaller, medium company. And yes, they should 100% manage their risks in a standardized way. And I've already given away a little clue, which is standardize. This means that we need to focus on a framework. So there are multiple risk management frameworks scattered around the project management world. There are a couple of very generic ones. I think we'll get a chance of maybe speaking a little bit more about it. I'm not going to go into a lot of details now, but for instance, ISO 31000, it's a very generic enterprise risk management framework that we can adapt to any company of basically any size. It's very important to keep in mind that a framework gives you the broad strokes of risk management. You need a process for a specific company, a specific enterprise, specific business. That process can be described by a deliverable that we call risk management plan. And there are multiple templates for risk management plans, but they will basically tell you anything that a company does in terms of risk management. Their grid assessment, the criteria that they use to categorize risks, the budgets of the projects that might be affected by certain criteria, the stakeholders, the governance, the meetings, the escalations, even the template of the minutes of meeting can be inserted there if we really want a detailed risk management plan. And associated to a risk management plan, you also have templates for risk registers, which would ideally be standardized for every project within an SME. And once you have the stakeholders, your tools, your process well identified, you can start managing risks and opportunities, of course, in a standardized way across the entire company, which will allow you to compare basically all the risks, to categorize them neatly, and to provide the proper visibility to management for strategic decisions. So yes, SMEs should definitely manage their own risks. Absolutely.
Thank you. And in addition to, if there is any SME here who was doubting that, then the 31,000 standard is actually very nice and easy. It's not too difficult to understand as standard goes. But let's then step into this one thing that is the challenge for risk managers, especially in smaller companies, risk monitoring and reviewing. This is something that we briefly touched upon, that, okay, you identify the risk and you do some mitigation or controlling of that risk, and then you go, okay, let's leave it. Of course, this is not what should happen because risks are evolving over time. The company goes on, the world around us evolves all the time. So we should keep an eye on risks continuously. But how do you incentivize people to actually do that, Kiramari? And how would you say that, okay, you're not having to chase these people around all the time and go, okay, you have to review your risks. Come on, this is the day you have to do it. How do you incentivize, motivate people to do that? And are there tools that help you to do that? Or is there something else you put into place, like meetings or something?
Yeah. So I think, yes, still in the end, even if you have a good risk monitoring in place, I think still you need to chase people. You need to chase people always. That's just the way it is. What helped us was really, I mentioned it already, is to have, first of all, the buy-in, the commitment from the leadership, right? So when we started putting our risk review process, our governance in place, we really had the buy-in from our head of, and she said, we are going to review our risk on a monthly basis. And this was really something that we would do continuously, regularly every month. Yes, sometimes there was a super important other meeting that had to be squeezed in, and so we needed to move, but we would never cancel it. We would do it on a monthly basis and review our risks. So I think that was really helpful to have this in place. And then from there onwards, so the project managers would then prepare with the teams for this review. So they would sit together and update the risks, review the risks. And so this would be then the preparation for this overall review that we would have with the head of. So I think this really, helped having the buy-in, having a regular review, and then having this bigger meeting as the reason why then or beforehand the project managers and their teams needed to review the risks. But for the software tools, so indeed, I was mentioning it before, it was really helpful having a tool that everybody was able to use already before. So having this add-on in Jira was really easy to not just identify the risk, but also to update them and to monitor them. We would have on the Kanban board, on the different columns, we would have the different status of the risk, and we would really visualize it and move it from one status into the other. So that was really helpful. And then, of course, also having the KPIs, having a nice dashboard to see some numbers on what has happened since last month, what are our top risks, to have a nice risk matrix in place where we could directly visually see, okay, we have 5 very high risks and 10 medium risks. This, I think, really helps then as a support for these regular risk review sessions, and also helped the teams see that things were happening and that really their risks were reviewed on a regular basis.
Thank you for that. Joao, have you seen such kind of emergency risk meetings in your experience, like when something happens either in the market, like maybe something in the business is changing and that triggers the risk?
Absolutely. So I think there are 2 things that can prompt not emergence, but as well as rebaselining of risks. So you have internal factors such as, for instance, a new financial exercise that can shift the assumptions or the initial assumptions surrounding a risk. So the economic impact, the amount of resources that you can allocate to a risk that makes you think, oh, maybe this is a little bit more critical since we cannot go through the mitigation plan as we wanted. But, and this is where the emergency part comes into play, there are external factors well beyond our control, or sometimes within our control, but a little bit overlooked, such as, and I'm going to give an example that is very actual, the tariffs imposed by the US and the retaliatory tariffs imposed by other countries. Those were a bit of a headache at the beginning of the year because they were so unpredictable. And we still needed to manage risks accordingly. Things that were imported from the US, things that we needed to send it into the US. So that sort of factor plays a huge role in it, as well as other sort of sanctions or retaliatory measures, such as the classification of certain suppliers as military end users, which brings into play something we call export control, which limits what we can export, what we can import, also the data that we need to give out. So it's very strategic, high-level risks, but they need to be addressed regardless.
It sounds like you will have a very busy 4 years ahead of you.
Yes.
Very unpredictable.
100%.
All right. But before we look into what Monica has been doing, finally, I want to talk about risk managers. What kind of people do they have to be able to bring together and excite the entire organization of risk management? And I know that you both have worked on risk management yourself, but are there maybe some fun stories, something that the audience here and ourselves could use in the future of say, okay, this is the technique that you can use to keep everybody interested in risk management and risk managers and listen to you and run behind them with a review notice of, okay, this is, you have to review your risks today. Kira Marie, do you want to start?
Sure. I think like what I was saying before, like these awareness sessions that I used to do with starting off with some daily examples of risk management. I think that was always something that everybody liked and enjoyed. We would then on the second slide have this nice umbrella with reasons on why we need to do this risk management in this specific case, and really saying that, successful risk management leads to successful program management. Yeah, I think that this like presentation really so I was doing that awareness session a few times, and then even the weeks after, everybody would still talk about this nice umbrella and the examples. So having something that sticks to mind and that people, remember and that people will talk about, I think that definitely helps. Also, we tried to have generally some workshops on risk management and making it a bit lighter, making it a bit fun to talk about it and to identify new risks. So I think, these are some of the examples to make it a bit lighter. So I think really as a risk manager, you need to have this educational spirit also, that you really want to teach about risk management and bring people on board and really have everybody be aware of how important risk management is. I think that is really, really important if you have that characteristics.
So keep it engaging and fun.
Yes.
In the trainings.
Exactly.
Joao, what about you? What have you done and how do you excite your team about risk management?
I'm fully on board with Kira Marie's answer. Keeping it light and interesting in the trainings and the awareness sessions is key. It's fundamental. I feel like also providing examples of successful case studies of both opportunities management and risk management. I think that always adds a little bit of this is a success story to the whole thing. But ultimately, I'd say that the biggest ambassadors that we have for risk management are risk managers, such as myself, you guys, Kira Marie. Ultimately, the way we convey our ideas, the way we talk about risk management, the way we exemplify or give out quick examples on risk, the umbrella thing, success stories, the enthusiasm that we bring to the table, the feeling of having diffused a potentially critical threat, or even better, capitalize on an opportunity that is going to bring immense value to a business. All that is what makes other people adhere to what you have to say and be on board with your ideas. And I think that's how you really need to, or have to approach this risk management topic in order to get everyone into the same page and excited about something that typically is a bit scary because we're talking about potential threats. It's about turning it the other way around and showing there's no better feeling than knowing that everything is potentially very safe because we managed to identify where things could go wrong.
Thank you for that. That was very insightful. So we have to be fun, we have to be engaging. We also should have a culture in the organization that talks about risk management. We have to think about collaboration because it's not just one man's or woman's job. And of course, keep in mind that risks are dynamic, so we need to keep an eye on them all the time.
Exactly.
Very well summarized.
Thank you for that. But I think now is the time to look into what Monica has been putting together, because otherwise we run out of time. Can you show us, Monica, what you have been working on?
I will. It's been so nice session for today. There is a question, is there a need for a separate risk manager role, usually in a project management, or should it be one of the tasks for a project manager themselves? You go first.
Okay, thank you, Monica. I think it depends largely on the amount of projects within a company, of the size of the company, and the global organization. So I'd say that, yes, ideally there should be someone in charge of risks, even if it's more of a reference person within the team to have the theoretical overview, even if that person encompasses a whole department or multiple projects. And maybe the risk management itself can be led by the project manager, as long as he or she is well aware of their role and keeps in touch with the risk focal points, per se, so to say, in order to ensure that everything is taken into account. Of course, if the resources are available, if the portfolio is not huge in terms of project number, obviously, if there's a dedicated resource only for risk management, that would be ideal because that would be the person to lead the workshops, to identify risks, to bring everyone around the table. Obviously, when I say identify risks, is to facilitate identifying risks. We don't expect risk managers to do all the work since the identification to the definition of the mitigation plan. That's absolutely not what I mean. But yes, a dedicated resource would ideally always be optimal.
Mm. Okay, do you want to add on anything?
Fully agree, exactly.
Fully
Ideally,
agree.
of course, right? It helps having a risk manager that can support the project managers, but ultimately the risk managers are the project managers are responsible for their projects, right? So the risk management is a part of it, so they should also be doing the risk management of their projects. But yeah, having a risk manager globally that supports across projects, across programs, I think that is always helpful.
And while we are working in Jira, of course, our products are available for risk management, are available on Jira. Then the project managers are usually working in Jira as well. Kira-Marie, you said it yourself that in your earlier assignment, you needed to find a tool that aligns with the ways of working of the other people that need to be involved with risk management. So this is where we also saw the opportunity and the need for having a risk management process, being able to describe it here. And yes, I see it also like in a small organization, project manager needs to be on top of so many things. In a bigger organization, what I see the risk manager role is to put in place the framework for the project managers, right?
Yeah.
Jump into the process occasionally as well, but not being hands-on with the process. But really nice session, by the way, and risk management should be done in a collaborative brainstorming session. Maybe this was not tuned in for brainstorming that much, but I captured some things that are super important for organizational risks. So we need to look at different angles of risks, right? I created this risk category for any risk manager to start the thinking process, for the group to start brainstorming. Are there any risks in our organization that are related to reputation? So there is a safety aspect of our products. Let's imagine we are in safety critical domain. So we can be looking into unfavorable publicity due to safety incidents, right? A couple of more like change management, of course, in any organization undergoing big business or other changes, implementing efficiency means and so on. This is definitely related to organizational risk management. And of course, all changes related to innovation. I captured that from you, that we need to, again, put in place the checklist for all the plans that we have for the future, that these are following the line of safety as well. I know we are out of time in any moment now, but just to show like organizational risks, they need to be available for all people working in your teams, right? And what is amazing in Jira that you can start linking all these incidents or project risks and product risks together. And also this helps you to actually visualize which of the organizational risks maybe get the most input from other in-streaming processes. So you can visualize this and also see the need for reassessment, rebaselining, as you said, Joao, occasionally or periodically. Yeah. Happy to show it to anybody who is interested in how we help organizations create these different projects for different angles to risk management. I will definitely send you guys the link to book a dedicated session with us. But yeah, thanks, Maria and Joao, and of course, Marianne.
Thank you, Monica, so much for showing what you have been working on while we were chatting away. And thank you, Kira, also from me. And for everybody who attended, and for the questions, of course, and the comments, thank you for joining. And hopefully we can do this again at some point.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody who participated.
Have a great day.
Have a great day.
Bye.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.